the author of a limpid and powerful prose epic dealing with the life of Frederick the Great, the patient artist who in his boundless diligence had woven a rich tapestry of a novel, Maya by name, that brings together myriad human fates in the service of an idea, the creator of a trenchant tale entitled A Wretched Figure, that had earned him the gratitude of the younger generation by showing it a path to moral fortitude existing even beyond the depths of knowledge. And lastly, here ends the list of his mature works, the thinker whose impassioned treatise, Art and the Intellect, had led serious critics to rank him, on the strength of the work's rigorous logic and eloquent use of antitheses, alongside Schiller and his meditation on naive and sentimental poetry. Gustav Aschenbach was born in L., a county town in the province of Silesia, the son of a senior official in the judiciary. His forebears had been officers, judges, and civil servants, men who led disciplined, decently austere lives, serving king and state. A certain inner spirituality had manifested itself in the person of the only clergyman amongst them, and a strain of more impetuous, sensual blood had found its way into the family in the previous generation through the writer's mother, the daughter of a Bohemian bandmaster. She was the source of the foreign racial features in his appearance. It was the union of the father's sober, conscientious nature with the darker, more fiery impulses of the mother that engendered the artist, and this particular artist. Since his entire being was bent on fame, he proved himself, if not quite precocious, then at least, thanks to the resolute and precise persona he cultivated, mature and ready for life in the world before his time. Barely out of school, he had acquired a name for himself. In the space of 10 years he had learned to perform his professional duties and manage his fame from his writing desk, and to make every sentence of his correspondence gracious and pregnant with meaning. Letters had to be brief, because the demands made on the staunch and successful are many. The 40-year-old, worn down by the strains and vicissitudes of his work, had to cope with a daily mail bearing stamps from all over the world. Equidistant from the banal and the eccentric, his talent seemed tailored to gain both the confidence of the general public and the demanding admiration of the connoisseur. Since boyhood he had been pressed from all sides to achieve, and to achieve the extraordinary, and thus had never known leisure, the carefree idleness of youth. When in about his 35th year he was taken ill in Vienna, an astute observer said of him in public, "Here is how Aschenbach has always lived," and he made a tight fist of his left hand. "Not like this," and he let his open hand dangle freely from the arm of his chair. That rang true, and what made Aschenbach all the more heroic and noble was that he was not robust by nature, that he was merely called to constant industry, not born to it. Medical concerns had kept the boy out of school and dependent on private tutoring. He had grown up solitary and friendless, and must have realized early that he belonged to a species for which talent was less a rarity than physical strength, the strength needed to make something of the talent, a species that tended to make the most of its powers early, seldom developing them into old age. But his motto was durchhalten, persevere, and he regarded his Frederick the Great novel as nothing short of the apotheosis of this command, which he considered the essence of a cardinal virtue, action in the face of suffering. Then, too, he ardently desired to live to old age, for he had always believed that the only artistic gift that can be truly called great, all-encompassing, and, yes, truly praiseworthy, is one that has been vouchsafed productivity at all stages of human existence. Wishing to bear on such frail shoulders the burdens imposed by his talent, and wishing to go far, he had great need of discipline, and discipline was fortunately an inborn quality he had inherited from his father's side of the family. At 40, at 50, and even when younger, at an age when others dissipate their talents, wax rhapsodic, or blissfully defer their grand projects, he would start his day early by dashing cold water over his chest and back. Then, having set a pair of tall wax candles in silver holders at the head of his manuscript, he would spend 2 or 3 fervent, conscientious hours offering up to art the strength he had garnered in sleep. It was a forgivable error, indeed it betokened a victory for his moral stance, that the uninitiated should take the world of his Maya, or the epic background against which Frederick's feats unfolded, as the product of prodigious strength and unending stamina, but in fact they grew out of daily increments of hundreds upon hundreds of bits of inspiration, and the only reason they were so perfect, overall and in every detail, was that their creator had held out for years under the strain of a single work with a fortitude and tenacity analogous to those Frederick had used to conquer his native province, and that he had devoted only his most vibrant and vital hours to its composition. For a major product of the intellect to make an immediate, broad and deep impact, it must rest upon a secret affinity, indeed a congruence, between the personal destiny of its author and the collective destiny of his generation. The people do not know why they bestow fame upon a given work of art. Though far from connoisseurs, they believe they have discovered 100 virtues to justify such enthusiasm, yet the true basis for their acclaim is an imponderable, mere affinity. Once, in a less than conspicuous passage, Aschenbach stated outright that nearly everything great owes its existence to despites, despite misery and affliction, poverty, desolation, physical debility, vice, passion, and 1,000 other obstacles. But it was more than an observation. It was his experience, the very formula of his life and fame, the key to his work. Was it any wonder, therefore, that it likewise informed the moral make-up and external demeanour of his most representative protagonists? The new type of hero that he favoured, and that recurred in a variety of forms, had been analysed quite early by a shrewd critic, who said it rested on an intellectual adolescent conception of manliness, one that stands by calmly, gritting its teeth in proud shame, while swords and spears pierce its flesh. It was all very beautiful, clever, and precise, though it erred on the side of passivity, because composure in the face of destiny and equanimity in the face of torture are not mere matters of endurance. They are an active achievement, a positive triumph, and the Sebastian figure is the most beautiful symbol, if not of art as a whole, then certainly of the art here in question. What one saw when one looked into the world as narrated by Aschenbach was elegant self-possession concealing inner dissolution and biological decay from the eyes of the world until the 11th hour. A sallow, sensually destitute ugliness, capable of fanning its smouldering lust into a pure flame, indeed, of rising to sovereignty in the realm of beauty. Pallid impotence, probing the incandescent depths of the mind for the strength to cast an entire supercilious people at the foot of the cross at their feet. An obliging manner in the empty, punctilious service of form, the life, false and dangerous, and the swiftly enervating desires and art of the born deceiver. Observing all this and much more of a like nature, one might well wonder whether the only possible heroism was the heroism of the weak. Yet what heroism was more at one with the times? Gustav Aschenbach was the writer of all those who labour on the brink of exhaustion, the heavy-laden, the worn-down who yet hold their heads high, the moralists of achievement, who, though slight of stature and chary of means, manage to attain, for a time at least, the trappings of greatness, by combining rapture of the will with clever management. They are legion. They are the heroes of the age. And they all recognized themselves in his work, found themselves validated, celebrated, glorified therein. They rendered him thanks, and proclaimed his name. Young and green with the times, and ill-advised by them, he had stumbled in public, made false moves, made a fool of himself, violating tact and good sense in word and deed. Yet he eventually gained the dignity to which, as he maintained, every great talent feels instinctively drawn. One might even say that his entire development consisted in jettisoning the constraints of doubt and irony, and making the conscious, defiant assent to dignity. Lively, intellectually undemanding formulations are the delight of the bourgeois masses, while passionately unbending youth is excited only by the problematic, and Aschenbach was as problematic and as unbending as any youth. He had overindulged the intellect, overcultivated erudition, and ground up the seed corn, revealed secrets, defamed talent, betrayed art. Yes, even as his works entertained, elevated, and animated the gullible reader, he, the youthful artist, held the 20-year-olds in thrall to his cynical remarks about the questionable nature of art and artistic genius. Yet nothing would seem to dull a deft and noble intellect more swiftly, more surely, than the sharp and bitter stimulant of erudition. And clearly the adolescent's melancholic and ever so conscientious thoroughness is shallow when compared with the profound resolve of the mature master to deny knowledge, disavow it, put it behind him, head high, lest it should in the slightest maim, discourage, or debase the will, action, feeling, and even passion. How is the celebrated wretched figure to be interpreted, if not as an outburst of disgust with the indecent psychologizing of the age as embodied in the figure of a weak and fatuous semi-scoundrel who fashions a destiny for himself by pushing his wife into the arms of a callow youth out of debility, depravity, or ethical laxity, and then feels profoundly justified in committing base acts? The power of the word by which the outcast was cast out heralded a rejection of all moral doubt, all sympathy with the abyss, a renunciation of the leniency implicit in the homily claiming that to understand is to forgive, and what was under way here, indeed what had come to pass, was the miraculous rebirth of impartiality, which surfaced a short time later with a certain mysterious urgency in one of the author's dialogues. Strange associations. Was it an intellectual consequence of this rebirth, this new dignity and rigour, that at approximately this time critics observed an almost excessive intensification of his aesthetic sensibility, a noble purity, simplicity, and harmony of form that henceforth gave his artistic production so manifest, indeed so calculated, a stamp of virtuosity and classicism? But does not moral fortitude beyond knowledge, beyond disintegrative and inhibitory erudition, entail a simplification, a moral reduction of the world and the soul, and hence a concomitant intensification of the will to evil, the forbidden, the morally reprehensible? And has not form a double face? Is it not moral and immoral at once? Moral as the outcome and expression of discipline, yet immoral, even anti-moral, insofar as it is by its very nature indifferent to morality, indeed strives to bend morality beneath its proud and absolute sceptre. Be that as it may, development is destiny, and should it not take one course if lacking in the glamour and obligations of fame, and another if attended by the interest and trust of a broad audience? Only incorrigible bohemians find it boring or laughable when a man of talent outgrows the libertine chrysalis stage and begins to perceive and express the dignity of the intellect, adopting the courtly ways of a solitude replete with bitter suffering and inner battles, though eventually gaining a position of power and honour among men. And what sport, what bravado, what pleasure there is in fashioning one's own talent! As time progressed, Gustav Aschenbach's creations took on an official, didactic tone. In later years his style lost its brashness, its fresh, subtle nuances. It became fixed and exemplary, polished and conventional, conservative, formal, even formulaic, with the result that the ageing man, like Louis XIV, if we're to believe tradition, banned all prosaic words from his vocabulary. It was then that school officials began including selected passages from his works in the textbooks they prescribed. He found it only fitting that a German prince who had just ascended the throne should confer nobility upon the author of Frederick on his 50th birthday, and he did not decline the honour. After several restless years of testing this place and that, he eventually chose Munich as his permanent residence and led a solid bourgeois existence there, enjoying the respect that is in certain cases vouchsafed the intellect. The marriage he had contracted in his youth with a girl from a scholarly family was cut short, following a brief period of bliss, by the girl's death. It left him with a daughter, who was now married. He had had no son. Gustav von Aschenbach was of somewhat less than medium height, dark and clean-shaven. The head seemed a bit too large for the almost dainty physique. The hair, brushed back, was thin at the crown, but very thick and grey at the temples, and framed a high, rugged, scarred-looking forehead. The gold frame of the rimless spectacles cut into the root of a strong, nobly aquiline nose. The mouth was large, now slack, now suddenly narrow and tight, the cheeks sunken and furrowed, the well-shaped chin slightly cleft. Important destinies must have passed through that head, which was often tilted dolefully. Yet it was art, not, as is commonly the case, a hard and turbulent life, that had formed the physiognomy. The dazzling give-and-take of the interchange between Voltaire and the king on the subject of war had been conceived behind that brow. Those eyes, wearily peering out through their lenses, had seen the gory inferno of the sick bays in the 7 Years' War. On a personal level, too, art is life intensified. It delights more deeply, consumes more rapidly. It engraves the traces of imaginary and intellectual adventure on the countenance of its servant, and in the long run, for all the monastic calm of his external existence, leads to self-indulgence, over-refinement, lethargy, and a restless curiosity that a lifetime of wild passions and pleasures could scarcely engender.